This conversation is for you if you have ever wondered why trauma can stay with us long after the traumatic event or events have occurred. Why a sound or a place or a smell can suddenly pull you back to that place of fear and unsafe danger. Why some people become hyper aware of everything in the room while others may become detached or emotionally numb and disconnected. Trauma changes the way our mind and body respond to the world around us. But healing is possible. And that's the most important piece right there. Healing is possible. So today we're talking about common reactions to trauma and how a treatment modality that I like to use called prolonged exposure therapy supports your healing journey, and how the divine feminine invites us back to trust in ourselves, in the world around us, and embodiment and wholeness within ourselves. So that's the journey we are going on today on Gifts of Intuition. So welcome back. Okay, so I'm Melissa. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I'm a licensed therapist, and we here on this channel, we talk about mental health, women's issues, today specifically trauma healing, intuition, and the wisdom of the divine feminine. So if you've ever felt like your body is still carrying something from the past, and it's negatively impacting you today, this conversation is for you. So let's begin with some important components to this. I want to make sure that it's clear that trauma responses are not weakness. They are intelligent survival responses. So your nervous system, your body, your brain, when going through a trauma, do the best they can to get you through that as safely as possible, with survival being the number one goal. At a later stage, when you're no longer in danger, the same trauma response that got you through whatever traumatic event or traumatic events that you lived through are no longer helpful. In fact, they are now impeding your ability to move forward in your life. So I want to look at some common reactions to trauma that many people experience. And these are common experiences both for PTSD, people who have the diagnosis of PTSD following a specific trauma or series of traumas, but you can also have some of this even if you don't meet full criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. So I want to make that clear too, that I'm talking about the impact of trauma, whether or not it meets criteria for PTSD. And the treatment I'm going to talk about today is used in the treatment of PTSD, but can also be helpful if you don't fully meet the criteria for that diagnosis. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is hypervigilance. So what this can look like is that feeling of being on edge, scanning the room for danger, or scanning an environment for danger, having a difficult time feeling safe enough to relax. It can be like that person who needs to know where all the emergency exits are when coming into a new space, or feeling uncomfortable and not able to be like in a restaurant, for instance, and sitting with your back to the door you need to be able to face it so that if someone comes in or something horrific starts to happen, you are not caught off guard, you see it coming, and you are aware of how the heck you're going to get out of there and save yourself or the people you're with. This can also look like maybe somebody who grew up in a toxic or abusive home environment. Maybe now they scan the room for the emotional temperature of the room before they can feel comfortable and know that there's no negative energy or people there who are going to cause harm or damage in some way. So it's just hypervigilance is this need to know that if something's going to happen, I'm not caught off guard, and if it does happen, I have the ability to escape and be safe. People who have not experienced trauma don't really think like that. They just go in, go out, meet new people, whatever, do their thing, but they're not looking for danger around every corner. So it can be that feeling that like at any moment something bad can happen, and so you're just constantly looking for that. This could look like also trouble sleeping, and being easily startled, or again, reading the room to determine if it's okay to be safe, to feel safe. And then we've got avoidance. Avoidance is one of the most common reactions to trauma, and one of the most contributing factors to the forming of PTSD actually after a traumatic event has happened. So this might be avoiding places, people, conversations, emotions, memories, body sensations, smells, any number of things. Anything that reminds the nervous system of the trauma can feel unsafe. Regardless, if there's actual danger there, if it feels familiar to the associated trauma, it feels dangerous. So avoidance may provide temporary relief, like a Band-Aid, but it often keeps that trauma response alive because there's a feedback loop that's occurring there where if you do in fact avoid the thing that feels uncomfortable, you are communicating to your brain, yes, it is in fact too dangerous for me, so it is important that I avoid it. So your brain takes that information and goes, okay, still putting this in the dangerous box. So every time I come into a connection with that or encounter that, it's dangerous, so it must be avoided. And so you form these beliefs of, I can't go there, I can't talk about that, I can't be around that person. The reality is, assuming the trauma is done, the situation is now in the past, and you are in present day safe place, you can, but you so believe you can't because you always have avoided ever since that trauma. So inadvertently communicating to your brain that if something feels uncomfortable, it's because it's dangerous. So part of the work that we want to do is really addressing that need to face what we've been avoiding so that your brain can get that corrective experience and see that just because something feels uncomfortable or dangerous, it doesn't mean that it is. And it's important to note that when we do this work, any kind of trauma work, you need to be out of the trauma situation. Okay, so if you're still in the abusive relationship or you're still, in an environment that is in fact unsafe for you, that's the crisis. That's the number one goal, is to get out of that environment or that relationship, that dynamic, and then do the work to address the trauma. Okay, so this is not you do therapeutic trauma work to address your trauma and then go back home to the trauma, if that makes sense. So it is important to note that this is really looking at symptoms that have occurred due to a past trauma that are still impacting you today as if the trauma is occurring, when the trauma is in fact not occurring anymore. So I just want to clarify that. So another common reaction to trauma is intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. This can show up as distressing memories, nightmares, even physical body sensations that feel like the trauma is happening again, or just really vivid imagery, vivid emotional flashbacks. And when I say vivid, I mean to the point where it feels like you're there again. It feels very real. It feels like you're reliving this again. And your body and your mind have a hard time recognizing if it's happening again or if it's just a memory. It feels very real. And so you'll experience it over again. So if you've ever had a nightmare about a traumatic event, you can be like you're right back in it again. And it feels so real. It doesn't feel like a dream where you wake up and you're disoriented, you know? It's like, oh my God, it happened again. Or the flashback can be so overwhelming, or the physical sensations of it can be so overwhelming that there's parts of you that just you don't want to feel, because you're feeling the physical sensations of that thing happening to you again. It can be very painful. So flashbacks are not just mental; it can be physical. Emotional numbing. I talked about that before, where it can go like overwhelm or just total cutoff. So some people go the overwhelm route, and then that hypervigilant overwhelm, and then some people just completely disconnect or dissociate, or numb out. And this detachment from emotions and relationships and from yourself, it's a protective response that you develop, so that if you were to encounter grief or loss or disappointment again, it doesn't hurt the way it hurt before. So if there's a desire to not connect in a relationship because you've been so hurt in a relationship in the past, it can be that if this relationship fails, or they cheat on me, or they die, or it doesn't work out, or whatever it is, I don't want to get too attached, because if it fails or it falls through or it doesn't work out, I don't want to be as hurt as I got before. I don't want to feel that level of loss. So I'll get into a relationship, but I'm always going to have this barrier kind of thing. There's always going to be one foot out the door, so that I'm emotionally protected. That can be with family too, in many ways. It can just be in life in general. There can be like a fear of getting too excited about things, or getting your hopes up because something bad happened. There's a belief that it'll happen again, so I don't want to get too excited or too happy or too attached. Yeah, I don't want to feel that loss. Another common reaction to trauma is shame and self-blame. And this is a very common reaction, especially in a situation where culturally or societal pressures maybe also blame the victim. This is common when someone was harmed, someone else maybe was harmed or died, and there may be like a survivor's guilt, or there may be a sense of blame myself so that I can take responsibility and prevent that from ever happening again. But that shame and self-blame can look like, or sound like, I guess, I should have known better. What was I thinking? I should have stopped it. I should have left a long time ago. What was wrong with me? Just really looking back at trauma with a view of I could have controlled this or prevented it. And maybe there were things you could have done differently, but ultimately sort of forgetting that piece that someone else was involved or something else was involved, just putting it on yourself. And these thoughts are deeply painful, but incredibly common. I think about, women who get raped, whether it's date rape or they get attacked out, and they're out for a run or walking home, at night or something. And often the questions are, what were you wearing? Had you been drinking? Why were you walking alone? Why were you out for a run at that time? Whatever it is, there are these questions that are so pointed and really are victim shaming and blaming. So of course our brains are going to do it too. If there's a culture of blame, we are in that culture, so we're going to do it too. So again, that's a very common reaction that we often have. It must be on me if nobody else is taking responsibility or getting blamed is a common way of feeling like maybe I can do something in the future. And that's another one too. If you put yourself back into a situation, why didn't you learn the first time? Why did you go back to that person? Why did you blah, blah, blah? Yeah, so I'm going to move on, but I think I'm getting a bit redundant here. Just to say that shame and self-blame are very common pieces. I also want to throw out there, in terms of shame, I really like Brene Brown's work on shame. So if you haven't read any of her books or watched her videos, I encourage you to do so, because she really does a great job of talking about how shame is a demotivator. A lot of people feel like you need to shame a person or shame yourself into finding motivation to change or do better or whatever. And I really like her work, because she really talks about how it convinces you that you are the problem. Shame, that is, convinces you that you're the problem. And if you are the problem, then you lose that piece of you that thinks you can be better or can do better, because I am the problem, not a problem is occurring in my life, if that makes sense. Like there's a I am bad versus the situation is bad, the relationship is bad, this thing that happened is bad. If you believe that you are bad or inherently broken, you don't believe that you are capable of anything better or deserve anything better. Anyway, Brene Brown, check it out. Okay, so let's go into the divine feminine perspective on trauma. So from the perspective of the divine feminine, trauma is often experienced as a rupture in trust with your body, trust with your intuition, which breaks my heart. So often, in so many ways, we are getting covert information that tells us we cannot trust our intuition, and trauma is one of those. Unresolved trauma is one of those ways that we lose trust with our own intuition. We just think we're crazy, we're losing our mind, so we can't trust anything that we think or feel. It's a rupture in that trust of ourselves. The divine feminine invites us back into that relationship with our bodies. She asks us to listen to what the body has been holding and honor the nervous system's wisdom. Our bodies hold trauma. It shows up as autoimmune diseases, stress, sleep dysfunction, sexual dysfunction, relationship connection issues, fear of abandonment or being harmed. It shows up in so many ways. Gut issues, food sensitivities. There's so many ways that trauma can impact us physically, mentally, spiritually, everything, and it's all connected. So the Divine Feminine is trying to welcome you back to healing and connecting on all levels, rebuilding that trust in all your systems. Also, to stop judging the survival responses that I mentioned earlier and recognizing that they did serve you at some point in the process, though they don't serve you any longer and may be maladaptive at this stage. The Divine Feminine teaches us that healing is not linear. Anyone who's done any kind of therapeutic growth journey knows that it's not a straightforward line. It is a process of forward and back. It's cyclical. Like the moon, it has phases. There are moments of clarity and moments of darkness and shadow, like we talked about in the last episode. There are moments of rest and rebirth, and it's all welcome and it's all sacred. And your body does not forget, but it can learn healing. It can learn safety, relearn safety that it once knew. So again, the Divine Feminine is welcoming back that ability to receive without fear and trust in ourselves and the world around us. The treatment modality, now going into the treatment component, the treatment modality I would like to teach you about is called prolonged exposure therapy. It is one of the most effective evidence-based treatments for the treatment of PTSD, but also trauma-related symptoms that don't necessarily meet criteria for PTSD. I want to also say that EMDR, if you've heard of that, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is another treatment modality, also evidence-based, also has a great track record. According to evidence, they actually are pretty equal in how effective they are. So do what works for you. I am trained in both EMDR and PE, or prolonged exposure. And as a therapist, I have found I like prolonged exposure better. And I just don't think that there's enough people who know about it. So I want to highlight that in this video. So at the heart of trauma, especially trauma that becomes PTSD, is often avoidance. And we avoid a memory because it feels overwhelming. We avoid places, sensations, emotions that remind us of what happened. The challenge is that the avoidance can unintentionally teach the brain that the memory itself is dangerous. Though you're not in the traumatic situation any longer, you know that logically, your brain is not convinced that revisiting that isn't going to put you back in danger. So we need a learning corrective experience so that your brain can see, just because I revisit that memory in my mind Doesn't mean I'm going back to danger. It just means I'm revisiting a memory. But the nervous system after trauma may not believe that. And you can't just tell yourself, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm okay. I mean, you can, but that's like slapping a Band-Aid on top of a really deep wound. Your brain needs to see for itself that by thinking about this, feeling the feelings, revisiting it is uncomfortable, but not dangerous. It teaches this memory is painful, but I'm not putting myself in harm's way by thinking about it. EMDR is similar in many ways. So again, I'm not really going too much into EMDR, but it is similar in many ways in that it teaches you how to reprocess information. So they both have that component of taking an event that occurred that you have memory of, and that's important. You have to have memory of it. So it can't be something where, my mom told me this happened when I was 3 years old. I don't remember, but this thing happened when I was 3, and it's still impacting me today. We do need some memory around it. And we don't need all the memories around it, but at least some that we can work with. So, and I do actually want to highlight that's another common reaction to trauma too, is to not have all the pieces together. The memories are fuzzy at best, and it's bits and pieces. And a lot of that is because quite often during a traumatic event, we do dissociate, where our brains sort of check out of the moment. Like if your body can't leave the situation, your mind's like, I'm out of here for safety reasons, because it's too overwhelming. And so when it comes to trying to remember what happened, it's really hard because your brain wasn't fully present in the moment. But for the trauma work that we do, we do need you to have some personal memory that we can work with. If you don't have memory of the event, there's sometimes other memories that we can pull from that relate. I'm getting off on a tangent, but you could, work on that with your therapist as to what's the best direction to go to address your trauma. Okay, so when we do prolonged exposure, there are two main components to it, and it's imaginal exposure and in vivo exposure. So when we are addressing trauma, we pull out pieces called index traumas. So if it's one event, like a really bad car accident, that's easy. That is the index trauma. We pull a stop point, just before the accident and maybe on the way to the hospital. That chunk of time is the index trauma. But maybe if it's a abusive relationship or abusive childhood, maybe it's years of trauma. So, we pull some parts of that timeline that really stand out as pivotal or most intrusive to you today. And we call those index traumas. So from a long relationship or years of childhood trauma, there may be multiple index traumas, and we pull the one that's most impacting your life today, and that's kind of where we start. So once we decide on an index trauma that we're going to address for your treatment, we do the imaginal exposure and the in vivo exposure. So what is that? So imaginal exposure involves revisiting the trauma memory in a safe, structured, therapeutic setting with a trained professional. The goal is not to re-traumatize you. The goal is to help the nervous system process the memory rather than remain trapped in the fear of it. So I like to use the analogy of a filing cabinet. So it's like if you can imagine a big filing cabinet and you pull out the drawer, and every file is every event that has ever occurred in your life. When an event happens that is traumatic or horrific, scary, unpredicted, or unpredictable, and doesn't make sense in the moment, catches you off guard, your brain does what it can to place it in the filing system of your nervous system, and perhaps it puts it in the wrong place. It does its best, like, oh, put it here. This makes sense here, you know, just to kind of help you move forward. When it's mislabeled or incorrectly placed in your brain, so to speak, it sort of corrupts the other files around it and shifts the perspective or the lens through which you see yourself in the world. So what we want to do is we want to pull the file out, so to speak. That's an index trauma. We want to open the file and look at it, when historically this is a file you've been avoiding looking at. Just shove it back into the filing system. But doing that is corrupting everything else around it. So we want to pull it out. We want to open it up. We want to look at it. We want to walk through the events that occurred. We want to do that multiple times. So that's what you would do in session, is you would walk through in present tense as much as you can recall, over and over and over again, to give your brain the opportunity to see that just because I'm revisiting this event, though uncomfortable and scary, is not in fact dangerous to me. And then your brain can begin that process of going, oh, okay, it belongs over here. This is where I'm going to place it in my nervous system. When it's effectively placed, it no longer corrupts everything. But we have to lean into that which we avoid and face it and give it space and time for your brain to put it where it needs to go. So that also being said, your brain can recognize that it's happened in the past, it's not happening now, and it doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Could it? Sure, but that's life. We don't know that. But a common reaction to trauma is that you're just waiting for it to constantly happen again. So we want you to see that it's not right around the corner, assuming you are out of that toxic situation or abusive or whatever. Okay. And then the in vivo exposure is one you would do more as homework. And that's where you would identify things, places, situations that you have deemed unsafe because you associate them with the trauma. So let's say you got into a really horrific car accident. Maybe you don't drive a car anymore. So we want to get you driving a car. Or maybe you drive past the scene where the accident occurred. Or entering into a location that you have deemed unsafe because you associate with a trauma. So like, let's say you were mugged in a mall parking lot or something. And so like you don't go to malls anymore, or you avoid large parking lots or something like that. And so, you know, an in vivo exposure would be to go park your car in a parking lot at a mall and just ride out the feelings. Have a good cry, let it be uncomfortable, but allow your brain to see that just because this is uncomfortable, it's not in fact dangerous. Not all mall parking lots lead to me getting mugged. And I need to get to a place where I can go back to a mall, because we want you to get back to the things that you enjoy in life and not make your life so small and safe that you're not out there living your life to its fullest. We want to give you back whatever is being taken away as a result of what happened to you. Maybe listening to certain sounds that remind you of your trauma, maybe music that reminds you of a time period or listening to a song, a specific song that reminds you of a person or was playing maybe in the background when something happened. So yeah, inviting all these little things that you have cut out of your life because you associate them with danger, and bring them back in to see that uncomfortable, but not necessarily dangerous. Again, from a safe place. So again, it's important to note this means you are out of the dangerous situation, relationship, dynamic, environment, and we are operating from a safe place. This process happens slowly and intentionally. The nervous system is relearning through this experience that safety is possible. Safety with yourself and safety with others in the world. Okay, so then going on to the divine feminine. The divine feminine is really about reclaiming what you have lost. And what I love about integrating the divine feminine perspective is that exposure work becomes more than just symptom reduction. It really is bringing back a connection and opening you up and inviting you to receive what you have not been allowed to receive because it's just felt too damn scary. So it's a reclaiming of your body. It's a reclaiming of your voice, a reclaiming of your intuition, a reclaiming of a sense of safety with yourself and the world around you. The divine feminine reminds us that healing is not about forcing ourselves, but it's about a courageous witnessing of your healing and finding your capabilities to be whole again. It's turning toward what you've avoided with a sense of compassion rather than judgment or shame. That shadow piece that we talked about in the last episode, it becomes less frightening when it's met with tenderness. And we are shining light on the scary pieces and looking at them and allowing the shame and the fear to subside over time as your brain deems it that it's ready to do that. And we're facilitating that process. Okay. I want to offer you some journaling prompts to consider. I'd love for you to write them down and maybe take some time and do some automatic writing and just pen to paper, just go for it. Answer these questions and just don't overthink it. Just put it all out there. But for now, maybe just kind of answer them in your head as you hear me say them. But yeah, I'd really love for you to put the time in at a later time and really go for it. So the first one is, what do I notice myself avoiding because it feels emotionally unsafe? Again, what do I notice myself avoiding because it feels emotionally unsafe? Again, back like what I said, is it places? Is it music? Is it feelings? What is it? What do you avoid because it just feels too scary? Number 2, what does my body do when I'm triggered? So this is an invitation to really get present and connect with your body, noticing the physical and physiological symptoms and sensations that occur when you do feel triggered. So is it a racing heart rate? Is it like a pit in your stomach? Is it a welling up of tears in your eyes that you feel the need to pull back? Is it a shutting down? What is it for you? What do you notice physically actually happening in your body when you do get triggered? Number 3, what part of myself is asking to be safe again or feel safe again? What part of myself is asking to feel safe again? Is it my confidence, my ability to connect with other people, my independence, my ability to go out into the world? What is it? What is asking to feel safe again? And then number 4, what would healing look like if I trusted my body's wisdom? When you're disconnected from your body, you're not listening to its signals and cues. You have disregarded them as unimportant or wrong. And your intuition, you're cutting that off too. It's like, I can't trust myself anymore. I don't know. Especially when something out of the blue happened to you. Like I must have, missed it, so I can't trust myself in the future. So what would it look like, or what would healing look like if I trusted my body, my body's wisdom and my intuition? So again, I really hope that you'll take the time to answer those for yourself, and based on the answers that you come up with, my hope is that you will determine if seeking some therapy with a trained professional who specializes in trauma. And I don't just mean like talk therapy. I don't want to knock talk therapy. That's where you just go to therapy and you just check in and you just talk and you guys just, it's helpful. It is very helpful in many ways. I do talk therapy with some of my clients. But for trauma and other, mental health challenges, there are specific treatment modalities that are designed to get to the root, get to the solution, and get you out of it so that you can discontinue any cycles that are not serving you. So talk therapy is not indicated for trauma. I want you to know that. Just going to therapy and talking about it will not serve you in the long run. It may feel good. It's kind of a band-aid, but it's not going to solve the problem. You need to use a particular evidence-based treatment modality like EMDR or prolonged exposure to really get to relieving the symptoms of your trauma. I just had a call coming in on my phone, so I had to reach and stop it. So if you're wondering, why is she reaching? That's why. Okay. So in closing, trauma responses are not signs that you are broken. They're not an indication that you are flawed or that something's wrong with you. They're signs that your mind and body have adapted to survive, but now those adaptations are maladaptive in how they're impacting your life. Healing happens when we gently turn towards that which we've avoided. Evidence-based therapies like prolonged exposure can help. It can help you to the point of you no longer meeting the criteria for a PTSD diagnosis if you once did. Again, you don't have to have a diagnosis of PTSD to benefit from prolonged exposure, but if you do have it, we can get you to a place where you no longer meet criteria for that diagnosis. That's how effective it is, truly. And the divine feminine is reminding us that every phase of the healing process is sacred. So be gentle on yourself, have grace with yourself, embrace the process, trust the process. Know that you're in good hands when you're with somebody who is trained to deal with what you're dealing with. You are allowed to heal in cycles, aspects of forward and backwards, ups and downs. It's not meant to be linear. This is hard work, and if it were easy, you probably wouldn't need the work in the first place. So yeah, have grace with yourself. You are allowed to rebuild that trust within yourself, and you are deserving of that. You are allowed to feel safe again, safe with yourself, safe in your relationships, safe in the world around you. You deserve that. And there is absolutely a solution out there. I hope this was helpful for you. Helpful in understanding trauma, understanding that there is help out there. You are not broken. You're not alone. And yeah, you are worthy of a life better than what your trauma has left behind. So if this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Which trauma responses do you recognize in yourself? And if you haven't tried any trauma-specific therapy, I hope that you will. I hope that you'll look into it, find a therapist who specializes in prolonged exposure is my current favorite, or EMDR. Both are effective. But also, if this content was helpful for you, I hope that you'll like this video, subscribe to my channel, and keep coming back. Again, I've said it before, I have a long list of topics that I want to talk about, I want to share with you, I want to teach you about. My passion is helping women heal on their mental health journey, and knowledge is power. So I wanna reach as many people as I can. And if you know anyone who struggles with trauma, maybe even PTSD, please share this video with them if you feel like this might be helpful for them, and helping them find solutions that could be helpful in reclaiming their life and their trust in themselves and others. So until next time, I hope that you'll join me again as we continue on our quest to heal and grow and learn more about the divine feminine and mental health and other women's issues as we continue forward. So thank you. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.